Hi friends, welcome to Tech Harvesting. In today's video, we'll have a look at how we can add OAuth 2 authentication to our React application. So we'll be using the new Google Identity Services SDK to add authentication and the Google login functionality to our application. So you might have seen it in a lot of apps that you use that you have a login with Google button, and if you click on that, you'll be redirected to a website where you have all the Google accounts listed. You can choose one account and you can log in directly. So that's what we'll be implementing in our application today. So the technologies that we'll be using are React, and the backend will be also using Nestjs and MongoDB to store our users in the database. This is also a very secure and an easy way to implement authentication in our applications. So before we start, make sure to subscribe, like the video if you find it helpful, and let's get started. Before we get started, I just want to show you how our application is going to look like at the end. So when we load into our page, first we get a button to sign in, and Google will automatically give the name of the user that signed in and its email address, and it'll also show the profile picture. So this is done using the new version of the Google Authentication SDK, and when you click on this, it'll take you to our page, and then we can click in here, we log in, we create a user in our database, which is MongoDB in this case, and then we show the details of the user. We also have a logout button, which when we click, we'll get logged out. So that's what we'll be doing, and we also have this pop-up in here. So sometimes this shows up where we can just click on here. We don't have to do anything. It won't redirect us directly. We are logged in. So that's what we'll be implementing today, and yeah, let's get started. So to get started, we'll go ahead and create a React application, and we'll also create a Nestjs application for the backend. So first we'll be concentrating on the front end of the application, and then we'll go onto the backend where we can do some other stuff. So I'm going to use Wheat to create my application. So let's do yarn create Wheat. You can just run that command, or you can also do npx create-wheat. I'm going to name the project client. Going to choose React as my framework, and I am going to be using TypeScript. So as you can see, the project is created. Now we can just cd to the client folder. Oops. And then you can just run yarn, and that's going to install our dependencies. So by the time, let's create our Nestjs project for the backend. So for that, I'm going to run the command nest new, and we can give a name. For now, I'm going to give server. I'm going to be using yarn here. And if you don't know what Nestjs is, you can just go to docs.nestjs.com and read more about it. What it actually is just a framework like Express. Actually, Nestjs is made with Express, and it helps us to create APIs, GraphQL APIs, and different kinds of things like that. So I'll be using Nestjs, but you can use anything you like for the backend. For example, you can use another language itself if you like. You can use Express with JavaScript, Node.js. This is also using Node.js, by the way. So that's what I'll be using, Nest.js, but you can use Express. You could use some other framework like Koa or whatever you like. So this might take some time, but the front end would be installed in no time, as you can see. So now there's some things that we'll need to do to set up our Google authentication. So first we'll need to go to console.cloud.google.com. And in here, as you can see, I have created some projects in here, but what you'll need to do is to create a new project. If you don't have any, also just go ahead and create a new project, and I'm gonna name it my React Authentication. You can name it whatever you like. I'm naming it like this right now. Then you can hit create, and it'll create a project. As you can see, it's creating it right now. And go ahead, click on select project once it's created. As you can see, it has switched the project, and if you could not click on the select project button, you can just go to this drop down here and choose your project. Once you've done that, you have to go here and search for credentials and click on the APIs and services. And as you can see, here's where we get a client ID and a client secret. Now, client ID and client secret are things that we need to tell Google that we are the people who are authenticating and we want them to give access to our application. So before we go ahead and create a client ID or a client secret or generate any of these credentials, you'll need to go ahead and configure the consent screen. So you can click in here, or you can go here to OAuth consent screen and create it. So I'm going to click here, and in here we're going to hit on create, and it's going to ask us some details and we'll need to give it to Google. So first we'll need to give the name of our app, so you can give it as React Auth. The email, I'm going to give my email right here. Then I'm going to scroll down, and you'll need to give this developer contact information. Here you'll need to give it the email again, so I'm going to give it right here. Next, click on save and continue. Then you have scopes. Right now we don't want any scopes because scopes are usually used for getting some information of the user. Right now we're just getting the email and the name of the user and maybe even the image and all. So we don't need any of these scopes right now. But if you're planning to do some more things with the Google account, you can click on add or remove scopes and you can get more details from there. So you click on save and continue once again. Test users, we're not going to add any test users. You can just click on save and continue, and then you can scroll down and click on back to dashboard. So that means our consent screen is now ready, and we can create our credentials. So for that, you can go into credentials, click on create credentials and OAuth client ID. So this will generate a client ID and a client secret, as I told. So first we'll need to give the type of our application. As you know, all the React apps that we make are web applications. You can also use Android apps, Chrome apps, iOS apps, and different kinds of applications. So let's choose web application, give a name. Again, I'm going to give React Auth. And then you have these two options: authorized JavaScript origins and authorized redirect URIs. So what authorized JavaScript origins means is that which websites are allowed for accessing our authentication. So that means the URL of our website which we are using. So first I'm going to be giving HTTP localhost 3000 and redirect URIs. This is where our website is going to get redirected. For that also I'm going to give the same URL, so I'm just going to copy it from there and paste it here. Next we can click on create, and as you can see, OAuth client ID created, and we get our client ID and client secret. Now we'll have to copy this and keep it in a safe place. So for now I'm going to copy this, create a file here. I can just name it credentials. I'm going to delete it later. For now I'm just going to paste both of them. Client ID, and this is our client secret. Now one thing that you'll need to make sure that you're not going to share all these client ID and client secrets with anyone, and I'm going to delete mine as soon as I finish this tutorial. So make sure that you create your own authentication credentials. We're going to do some stuff in the front end. So we're going to create a button which will help us to log in with Google, and then we'll connect it with the backend later on. So we'll be using this library called React OAuth /Google. It helps us to add authentication using the new Google Identity Services SDK. So previously there was another SDK that we used, but this is the new one, and the older one will be deprecated soon. So we should be using this one from now on, and that's what I'll be showing you in this video. So we can install it. So I'm gonna copy that and paste it onto my terminal in my client folder. And then if you scroll down, you can see how it's showing how it works. So you can sign in with Google, and then you can, if you want, you can also add this one tap sign in button, so it shows a pop-up in the corner and you can just sign automatically. So we have done all these things. The next thing we'll need to be doing is to add this Google OAuth provider, and we're going to wrap our entire application in this component. So I'm going to go ahead and open up app.tsx, and I'm also going to remove all the boilerplate code given to us by React, and by Vite in this case, and let us go ahead and import Google OAuth provider from this package that we just installed. We're also going to copy that and paste it in there. Oops, we don't need that in there. And so first we'll need to give our client ID. So I'm going to open our credentials file and copy our client's ID and paste it in there. Seems like there's a problem here. Okay, it says that we need something in here, so because it's an application and we're wrapping everything inside. For now, let's have a div in there giving hello. So that's what we need to configure it. Next, we'll need to add a button in which if we press, we can go ahead and display the OAuth page. So I'm gonna import Google login also, and then I'm going to copy this from here and paste it in here. Always make sure that you're having this Google login component inside our provider. It's only then that it's going to work. Next, I'm gonna run the app yarn dev, and also I just want to tell you that right now Wheat uses another port 57 something, so I went to the Wheat config and changed the server port to 3000 because this is what I used in the Google OAuth page also. If you're not using Wheat, never mind that. So I'm going to open localhost 3000, and as you can see, we got our hello and we got our sign in with Google button. So if we click on the sign in with Google button, it's a problem. So it says that the given origin is not allowed for the given client ID. A bit up with the error, and I found out that the problem was I was not adding localhost. So with this new version of this SDK, we'll need to add localhost to our authorized JavaScript origins and our redirect URIs along with localhost 3000. So I just added it. You can also just go ahead and add it to our Google Cloud Console, and then if you come back here and refresh this page, you'll be able to see sign in with Google and your account with your email in there. So that's what we wanted to do. Now if you were using the old SDK, then we would not have this right here. We just have sign in with Google, and we'll just have clicked the button and it will redirect us. So now if you were to click the button, you can see it shows us our account. If you choose it, it will redirect it back here, and if you click on inspect and go to our console, see we get this object, and it's having this object called credential. Now this credential object is what we need. So this is actually a JSON web token. So if you don't know what a JSON web token is, it's also called JWT. It's just a string which has some other object encapsulated inside it. So what I mean is, if you go to jwt.io, so I'll leave a link in the description, this JSON web token.io, and if you scroll down, you can see we have this encoder and decoder. So what we'll do is we'll go here, copy this credential, come back and paste it here. I'm gonna remove that code that was pasted. So right now you'll be able to see what it actually means. So this whole bunch of strings actually means something. It stores this data inside. So it says for example, the email of the person is codenaz07@gmail.com, the name, and it also gives us the URL to the picture of the person. So if I were to paste it in a new tab, then I would get the URL, a family name, a given name, and all these things like that. So that's given from us in this credential object. Now we'll need to access the given data underneath in our project, so we'll be using another package for that. So we'll be doing that soon, but right now we can see that it's logging us in, and it shows that we logged in. Right now it doesn't show us, but we can understand that we logged in. Now I'm gonna go ahead and change this on success function to do something that we need to do. I'm going to just turn off Copilot. So let's go ahead and create a request to our backend. We have not implemented the backend yet, but we will do it soon. And what it should be doing is we are going to send this data to our backend. And in our backend, it will get the details from there and send it back to us. So for that, I'm going to be using Axios. So let's create a new tab in the terminal, cd client. I'm going to yarn add Axios and yarn add dash d add type slash Axios. Let's import Axios. So import Axios from Axios. Now I'm gonna create this as an asynchronous function, and then what we can do is const date response, that's better, equals await Axios dot post, and then we can give the URL. So we're gonna post it to http / localhost 3001 / APIs. Oh, we just give it as login rather. So that's gonna go ahead and send a request to localhost 3001 login, and localhost 3001 is where I'm gonna start my API on. Then we can get the data as const data equals response dot data, and that will give us is the actual data sent from the request's response. And this response also has some other things. For example, the response dot, you can see config headers, status text, and all those. So once we are getting the data, I'm going to store it in local storage, so that later on when the user comes back, he'll be able to get the information that he's logged in and everything like that. So I'm going to do local storage dot set item, and it's going to be called, for example, just call it as auth data, and then we're gonna set it as the data which we're getting from the response. So that's what we'll be doing. We'll send the request, we'll get the response, and the response will save it in the local storage. Global states management, so that we'll be able to access the details from anywhere in our application. And for that, I'm going to be using Zustent. You can use Redux or anything like that, but I'm going to be using Zustent. I also have a video on using Zustent. You can check that if you want, but this is the Zustent website. So I'm going to add it, yarn add Zustent. And then we have to import and do we have to create a store. So for that, I'm going to create a hooks folder, use store.ts. So you're going to import create and create a use store hook. If you don't know about Justin, as I told, just watch the video and you'll understand it. I'll give a link to it in the description. And so instead of count, we will add what we name our local storage. It's called auth data. Same thing we'll add here. For by default, it's going to be local storage.get item, and it'll be auth data. Or if there is an auth data, we're going to parse it and we're going to get it from there. Else we're going to leave it at not null. I'm also going to leave this as any in here, so that we do not know the type of this, so I'm just going to leave it as any. Now we can use this use store hook and get the data from anywhere. So we'll be going ahead and setting the data or setting the item in our store as well, so that in other components we'll be able to access it. So later on we'll be creating a component called profile, and then in there we'll be having a logout button and some other details from the user, and we'll be getting it from the use store hook. So in here I'm going to create a set auth data. That's going to be a function with the set function. So as you can see, that's how we do stuff in Zustent. So we create an arrow function and set the state, and we're going to do that. So we'll make this an arrow function. As you can see, we're taking the state and we're setting it. So we'll take the state and we're going to set the auth data. And it's going to be state. So that's what we'll be doing. It's very simple to do, and we can actually, it's not going to work since we are giving the state in here. Instead, we're going to take an argument called, I don't know, we can call it as auth data or new auth data. and then what we'll do is we'll keep the new auth data there, and this will be of type any. So what we can do now is we can go here and create the useStore hook. We can create an instance here, and like this increased population, we're gonna have set auth data, and it's gonna be useStore. We're importing it. Whoops, we're importing it from our implementation, so I guess we should import it manually. So import from ./hooks/useStore, and we're not exporting it, so we're gonna export it directly. Then this is going to be set auth data again. So it says that property set auth data does not exist on type object since we're using TypeScript. That's the reason. So as you can see, it's giving it as an object. Instead of object, we'll need to give it the specific type. It's going to be any right now because we are having auth data and we don't know the types of these. So I'm just going to leave it as any. So we'll give types. We just need to go here and give it as any, as generic. So that'll work, and we can just leave that as any, and that also as any. And in here, so now we can see we have to do a lot of any's right now, but anyways, we get set auth data as a function, and then we can just go scroll down, and in here we can do set auth data, and we can give it as data. So this will give us the parsed version of it. And the reason why we're implementing global state, as I told, is because I'm having a different component that we're going to create. So that, for example, if you're creating an application and you want to implement this authentication, then you can just do it the same way in every component of yours. If you're using Justin, you can do it this way, which we're doing right now. If you're using Redux, you can do it the Redux way. Just save it. That's what I'm doing here. So if you're using Redux, here you're going to give the function that needs to be stored in the store in Redux. Head and jump to the backend. So I'm going to close our client folder and go to server. And right now, as you can see, since we're using Nest, we have quite a lot of files. It can get quite confusing, but right now I'm going to remove this file, which is the controller spec, for testing. I'm not going to test this file or this application. I'm going to remove this test folder also. And you can see this controller file. The controllers are where we add the routes and simple things that should be done. Services are where we do all the main logic of our application, and module are where we divide the parts of our application. You don't have to understand all of those things. For example, if you're using Express, you don't have to even worry about all these. If you're using Nest like me, just understand that. Also, you can refer the documentation or watch some tutorial on Nestjs before you before you continue this if you want to learn about Nest. But as I told you, can use Express also. So I've renamed this function to login, and we can change this on to a post request. And we're gonna import that from nestjs/common. Here we're returning hello, and yeah, let's see if that works. So let's click on our sign in button, choose our account, and as you can see, we're getting a course error. So that means we're not able to access localhost 3001 from localhost 3000. That's because we are on a different domain. So it's called cross origin resource sharing, and you can learn more about that if you want to. But the simple fix to that is going onto main.tsx or main.ts rather in our backend and running app.enable course, and we give the origin as localhost 3000. So if you're using Express, again, you can just install the course package, and you can do app.use course and give origin localhost 3000 in there. So this is how we do it in Nest. It's very simple. You don't have to install any packages also. So now if I were to reload the page, we get sign in, and if I choose it, seems like we're getting a 404. Let's see what's wrong. Okay, I get it. It's because I gave the post function but not give the route. So I have to give /login as the route, and hopefully this time I'll just reload the page once. So if I click on it and click on my account, you can see there's no errors this time. And if I go into my application tab, in our local storage. As you can see, we are getting hello, which is what we're sending back from here. Now if you reload the page again, that we'll get an error because hello is not valid JSON and it won't be able to parse it. So as you can see, we're getting unspec token H at JSON position 0. So obviously we won't be sending hello in our login route, but I just showed it to you just to show that we're having it working and set up. So I'm going to clear it and let's continue with our backend. We'll be installing this library called Google OAuth library. So this is in our backend, and this is an official Google library, and they give it to us for adding authentication in the backend. So I'm going to copy that, the name of the library, and let's just run yarn add Google OAuth library, and let's also yarn start that. So that was just the addition of the library, so it shows how we can do everything in here. So now let's import the OAuth 2 client, which is a function or an object that's given to us from the Google OAuth library. So we can do import OAuth 2 client from Google OAuth library. So now we'll need to create a new OAuth 2 client. So for that, I'm gonna do const client. Oops, I'm doing it in the wrong place though. So we can do it here. Const client equals new OAuth 2 client, and then we're going to give the client ID. So right now I'm going to create a process.env file, or a .env file rather. So .env, and give Google client ID, and we're going to give it as the client ID from the files you created previously. See if I can copy it. Then we'll need to access our env file. For that, if you go to Nestjs documentation and if you search for env, you can, I guess that was the wrong link, but configuration is what you'll need to go to, and you'll install at nestjs/config, which is a package like .env if you're using just Express or something. Then I'll need to import the module, so I'm going to go into my app module and import it. So now I'll be able to access the Google client ID by going on to process.env.google client ID. So that's the parameter we give into our OAuth 2 client, is the client ID. Then we'll need to give our client secret. So for that, we'll go in here, .env, and again our credentials.txt. I'm going to copy this from there, and Google client secret equals, okay, passed in there. Then we can copy that, and as you can see, the second option as I showed is the client secret. That's optional, but I'm just giving it. So process.env.google client secret. So that's setting up the OAuth client. Next, let's scroll down onto our function implementation, and here we're gonna get the data and do everything from our token. So for that, we'll need to go ahead and get the token. So for that, we'll have to get it from here. We can use the add body function, and I'm going to get the token. So we're going to be sending this token from our front end. And this add body function, if you're using Express, it's just rec.body, so we get the data from the body. Right now I'm going to use like this because I'm using Nestjs as a tool. So now we'll need to verify this token with Google, with the client that we created. So we called the client, and we're going to be using that to verify it. So we're going to do const ticket. This is usually called ticket. If you go into the documentation also for the library, you'll find it as ticket in here, as you can see. And we're gonna get that from using this promise. So let's make this asynchronous, and promise string. I'm gonna remove this, by the way, and we're gonna await client dot verify ID token. So that's gonna we're gonna pass in the token here, and it's gonna verify and give us some data from it. So for that, we're gonna give here ID token. The token is going to be the token which we're getting from the request body, and then we're also going to give an audience, which is our client ID. So process.env.client Google client ID. Then we can go ahead and console.log ticket.get payload. So that'll give us the information, and for now we can return success true, and I'm going to create this as a promise of type any. We'll be changing this soon, but for now I'm going to create it as any. So we'll try it again, but this time we're gonna go ahead and give the token. So we are getting the credential response. So once again, if I were to console.log the credential response, I'm gonna comment this just for a second. Whoops. So if I log in, you see we get this client ID and credential. This credential is what we want to send to our server as the token. So for sending it, we are going to add parameter, and in here we can add anything that we want to pass to our server. So we'll be adding token to credential response dot client to dot credential. So now if I were to come back here and refresh, click on the sign button, seems like the connection refused. It's probably some error. Let's see, it's not. Oh, we never started our server, so yarn start dev, and let's just try it again. And this time it's an internal server error. Let's see what it is. It says jwt.split is not a function. Found out that I had to give while I mentioned it, I had to give token as the name of the objects in the body. So I forgot to give, so we access it by rect.body.token, right? So I just gave rect.body and just gave the entire body object into this. And it seems like I removed my audience. So just add it back, env.google client ID. So now hopefully this works. Let's retry it. Click on sign in, give that. Seems like there's no errors right now, and as you can see, it's working successfully. We're getting all our information in here, and yeah, so we can send back all our data. For example, we don't need all of these, so we can send the email and name, create a new user with it. So we can do any of those things with it right now. That made very simple to use, and that's the small part of our authentication completed. Now we'll need to add the user to our database and do things like that. So I'm going to be using MongoDB in this video, so let's just go ahead and open cloud.mongodb.com. So I've got myself this cluster in MongoDB Atlas created. You can just go ahead and sign up if you don't have an account. I just created it, it's just free. Or if you want to use the local MongoDB instance, you can do that too. So I'm just gonna click on connect the application and copy that. Then I'm gonna go on here in our env file. I'm gonna give mongo_uri and paste that in. Then next let's go ahead and install MongoDB and the packages required. So I'm gonna close all these, and in here let's open up the Nestjs documentation and search for Mongo. It says Mongo it's all about MongoDB, and we can install these packages. So we'll be using Mongoose, and if you are not using Express, if you're not using Nestjs and you're using Express, something like that, you know what to do. Just create the model and everything within Mongoose, and you can do it that way. Right now I'm doing it this way, or using the Nestjs supported package for Mongoose. We're gonna add those, and then we'll import this. So in our main.ts, in our app module, we will do that, and we can do in here process.env. What did I name it, by the way? Just copy it, Mongo URI. Then we can create our schema. For that, I'm going to create a file called user.schema.ts, and in there I'm just going to copy all these. So by default it gives us something called cat, like some cat, because Nestjs has cat as a cat as a logo. So I'm going to replace cat everywhere with user. So the user will have a name, he will have an email, and yeah, that's it actually. So we'll have a name and email for it right now. Or maybe we can also add an image also. So prop image string. So this will be the URL to the image. You can scroll down and you'll get onto the place where we have to import the Mongoose module in our app module, and we have to give the schema and the details of it. So I'm just gonna place that also, and instead of cat we'll be using user. Oops, I guess we'll have to import from here manually. So we have a user document and user. We don't have a user schema. We have it here. Seems like it's not detected, so we'll need to import it manually. Oh, okay, got detected right now, so we can import it. So that's how we import it. And if you scroll down, we'll have a look at how we can, for example, create a new user and everything. So for that, we'll be using a service. So I had removed it in the beginning, but I'll need to add back right now. So we can just add back the service declaration. I just imported the app service and the constructor private app service to app service. So that's for injecting the service onto this, and we'll be able to create it from there. So I'm going to open our app service, and instead of this get hello, we'll create a function called login. That's better, yeah. So next we will look at instead of this string, you'll have any as the response. So we'll first need to go ahead and create a new user. So first we'll check if there's a user, and if there isn't, we'll create it. So if, and we'll need to inject the model for that before we need to use it. So we'll need to add all these imports. Again, add all missing imports. Instead of cat, we'll make it user. And add all missing imports. So if user model, this is the user model dot find one, and we are gonna we'll just create into a new variable called user exists. So const user exists is equal to this dot user model dot find one, where the email is email, and we'll get this email from here. Email is a string, and this user exists will be getting from a promise. So await is what we can do here, and we'll make this function asynchronous. So that should work, and it should give us if a user exists or not, and we can make this promise any promise. Next, you can check if user exists, then we can just leave it empty for now, and I guess the better way is just to check if there's no user. If the user does not exist, then we can go ahead and create a new user. So for that, this is what we'll need to do. It's really simple. Just gonna create a new one. So created user is this dot user new this dot user model, and the data is gonna be email, name, and picture. I guess I named image, I think. Yes, image. So these are coming from here, and we're gonna add it now. So name, image, and we're gonna have name to a string and image to string. All these are TypeScript stuff, by the way. So we can do created user dot save. I have to await that, by the way. So that's how we can create a user, and that should work. Then what we can do is we can just return created user, and in here if the user does not exist, else we can just return the user exists. So that's the user which already exists in the database. So after that, after we do all these, we can do this dot app service dot login, and we can give in the details. So to get the details, we can just, as we run this function, we got all the details. So we just do, we can create a variable called const payload equals ticket.getPayload, and you can do the email to payload.email, the name to payload.name, and the image to payload dot, I guess it's picture. Yes, there you go. So that will go ahead and give us all the information about that and save it into our database, and we can also await it. So I think it's a promise, right? Yeah, so we can await it. Then we can get the data, const data equals that, and then we are just going to return the data from here. So that was a lot we did. So we verified our token, then we got the data from it, and we saved it in our database, got the data from the database, and that's what we are returning. So let's just see if our server is running, which it isn't. So yarn start dev, and seems like it's not able to connect to the database. So let me just fix that. I think I forgot to give my credential properly in my .env file. There we go. So my password was wrong, so that was the problem. Just fix my password, and as you can, and I have changed it. So let me just restart, and it's connected and it's working properly. So let me open up localhost 3000, our website, and okay, so we'll have to create the storage first. So it's saved as an object. And one more thing I just realized is that in our app.tsx, where we are saving it into that, we're saving it directly. So instead of this, we're gonna run json.stringify. So that will make this data of JSON object into a string. Into a string instead of being an object directly. And in our store, so in our use store, as you can see, we are parsing it, so we're converting the string into JSON object. Let me just refresh. We got our button there, sign in, we have a console open, and if you click in there, seems like it's worked successfully. If you go into our application tab, as you can see, it shows our name, our email, and our image. Also, if you go back to our MongoDB, our atlas, and we go into our collections in user, so this seems like this is an old thing, so I guess I'll have to delete it. I had used this for a previous MongoDB tutorial, which is why there are all these things. But right now, as you can see, this is the one we just created. It gives us all the information and it also gives the profile picture. So if I were to open to a new tab, I'm getting the profile picture too. Great, so that's working. Now the last thing we need to do is to create a profile page where we can access the information from our users. So let's do that now. So next, let's go ahead and create that page. I'm not going to create this as a page actually, just as a component. So let's go into components. It's a new folder that we'll create, and I'm going to create a file called profile.tsx. It's a component. And you can also use React Router and create a page, like if you're creating some application not just for this authentication, then it would be better to do that, since you will be having routes in your application. But right now, since this is just a demo, we'll be having just a component. So we'll import the use store hook. So we're going to get const auth data equals use store, and that will give us the auth data from our store. And what we can do for now is we can do json.stringify auth data. Next, I'm just gonna remove that from there, and under there I'm gonna give profile. Now as you can see, we are getting these data here, get the profile name, everything. So let's make it look more better. We can have our name displayed. So I'll have this in an h1. Have an h3 with the auth data dot name, and we can have a image with the src img, and we can have an src equals, and we can give the auth data dot image. So let's see what that gives us. As you can see, it shows profile, gives our name and our profile picture. One more thing is that we can just have a check. So if we have auth data and auth data dot name, then we can just display it. So for example, if you're not logged in, then we don't have to display it, and it has to be in a single parent. So let's have it there. And if I reload the page, there's an error. So if you look at my console, dot name is not a function. Let's do that, and give and there too. So that will work. As you can see, it's displaying properly once again. You can also give the email if you want, so we can have email. Implement logout, so we can have import, and we'll import the Google logout function, and then we have a button with the text logout, and in here we can have an on click. Click, and in this function we're gonna do a couple of things. First, we're gonna call Google logout. After that, we're gonna go ahead and go local storage dot remove item, and we're going to remove the, or I guess it's better to set the local storage auth data to an empty object, and do that like that. And then we can also set it in the global state, so we can open our use store, and we're going to use the set auth data function. So import it, set auth data, and then we can just come here and do set auth data as an empty, like that. Now I actually tried it out before, that's why everything's gone, but if you log in now, we're getting everything. Click on logout and everything goes from there. So that's working, and yeah, that's pretty much it. One more thing that you can do is in this Google login component in our app TSX, you can give a use one tap prop in here. So what that does is it gives us this nice pop-up in here where when you log in, when you load the page, it shows us continue as Naseel with our name. It'll also show other accounts if you're logged in. Right now I logged out of my other accounts. So if you click on continue as Naseel, as you can see, it shows me like that and logs me in automatically. That's also a great thing, and that's also easy to implement. So that was it for this video. I just want to show you how you can add authentication to your application with all these technologies that we use. If you did find the video helpful, make sure you like it, and you can share it with your friends too if you think they'll find it helpful. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye friends.